Welcome to Stoic Golden Tribe. Brother, in a world that never stops talking, silence has become the rarest language of strength. Today we dive into a truth that many men overlook: the hidden power of silence and why real men don't overspeak. Too many men believe power comes from loudness, from proving themselves with words, from always having something to say, but history, wisdom, and human psychology all tell us otherwise. Silence commands more respect than empty words. A man who speaks less, but with purpose, is a man who cannot be ignored. In this video, we'll uncover why silence makes you magnetic and respected, how silence reveals strength in moments of conflict, the secret psychological advantage silence gives in relationships, and how mastering silence transforms you into a leader among men. Stay with me until the very end, because by the time this video is over, you will understand how to use silence not as weakness, but as your greatest weapon. But before we begin, brother, take a moment to subscribe to Stoic Golden Tribe, where men like you grow stronger, wiser, and unshakable. And if this message resonates with you, drop a comment below and let me know your thoughts. It fuels this brotherhood. Now let's begin. Chapter 1. The Ancient Roots of Silence and Power. From the dawn of civilization, silence has always been a mark of wisdom and authority. Think of the greatest leaders, philosophers, and warriors throughout history. Their power did not come from how much they said, but from how little they needed to say. When we look back to ancient Greece, the Stoics taught a profound lesson. Control over one's tongue is equal to control over one's mind. Epictetus, a former slave who rose to become one of the greatest philosophers of his age, once said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." This was not just philosophy, it was survival. In a time when the wrong words could cost a man his freedom or his life, silence was a shield. The Spartans understood this better than anyone. They became famous for their short, sharp responses. Their words were few, but when they spoke, kingdoms listened. This is where the term laconic speech comes from, named after Laconia, the region of Sparta. A Spartan king was once threatened by Philip of Macedon, who sent a message: "If I enter Laconia, I will raze it to the ground." The Spartans replied with one single word: "If." That one word carried more weight than an entire speech. Silence had sharpened their reply into a blade. Silence has always been the companion of strength. The strongest men did not need to shout about their power. They lived it, they showed it, they embodied it. Now let's shift to the East. In samurai culture, silence was considered a form of self-mastery. A warrior's silence was not emptiness, it was presence. The ability to remain calm, wordless, and still, even in the face of chaos, gave him an aura of control. It wasn't about hiding weakness, it was about projecting unshakable composure. And this wisdom continues into modern times. Think about the men we call legends, men like Marcus Aurelius, Abraham Lincoln, or even leaders in our own century. They weren't known for constant chatter, they were known for their measured words, for speaking less but saying more. Lincoln was called the Great Emancipator, but he was also known as the man of few words. His silence in meetings often unsettled his political rivals. They mistook it for passivity, but in truth, he was simply listening, calculating, and waiting for the perfect moment to strike with words that cut deeper than noise ever could. This is the foundation, brother. Silence is not emptiness. It is not weakness. It is concentration of power. Words are like arrows. If you shoot them carelessly, you waste them. But when you hold them back, when you release them with precision, each one has impact. The problem with modern men today is that we've been conditioned to believe we must constantly fill the air with noise. Social media, endless debates, talking without listening. It has diluted the value of words. We live in a time where the loudest often seem the most powerful. But true influence has never worked that way. The man who masters silence, who knows when to withhold his words, is the man who commands respect without asking for it. Look at any powerful room, a business meeting, a negotiation, even a social gathering. The one who talks the most is often overlooked, but the one who speaks least and only at the right time has every eye locked on him when he finally does speak. Silence is gravity. It pulls people in. So what is the lesson for us men today? We must reclaim silence as a weapon. We must resist the urge to overspeak, to constantly justify ourselves, to explain every detail, to chatter endlessly, just to be heard. Instead, we must learn the discipline of restraint. When you practice silence, people begin to wonder what you're thinking. And that, brother, is power. Mystery is authority. The unknown carries weight. To end this chapter, remember, the ancient world understood something that our modern world has forgotten. A real man doesn't overspeak because he doesn't need to. His presence, his silence, and his actions already speak for him. Now let me ask you, brother, do you think silence is harder to master in today's noisy world than it was for men in the past? Drop your thoughts below. Chapter 2. The Psychology of Silence. Why it commands respect. Silence is not just a cultural idea, brother. It is a psychological weapon. It shapes how people perceive you, how they respond to you, and even how they submit to your presence. To understand why silence holds such power, we need to explore how the human mind reacts to it. Let's begin with a truth most people ignore. Human beings are uncomfortable with silence. In conversations, when there is a pause, most people rush to fill it. They feel awkward, exposed, even anxious. Their instinct is to talk, to explain, to justify, to prove themselves. But the man who can hold silence without fear becomes the one who controls the interaction. Psychologists call this the power of the pause. A moment of silence in conversation forces the other person to reveal more than they intended. In fact, interrogators use this technique in interviews. They ask a question, then remain silent. The suspect, uncomfortable with the quiet, keeps talking, often exposing truths they would have otherwise hidden. The silence becomes a trap, and they fall into it willingly. This is the same principle in daily life. In business negotiations, silence often wins more than arguments. Imagine two men sitting across a table discussing a deal. One man keeps talking, trying to convince, trying to persuade. The other man listens, remains calm, and only says a few words. Who looks stronger? Who holds the frame? It's the silent man, because the more you talk, the more you reveal. The less you talk, the more they wonder. Now think about relationships. Many men lose respect in the eyes of women because they overspeak. They explain themselves endlessly. They justify their every action. They try to win arguments with words. But words cannot win respect. A woman may argue with a man who talks too much, but she will respect the man who can remain calm, silent, and unmoved. Silence in conflict is not weakness, it's strength under fire. Have you ever noticed this? The moment you stop responding to unnecessary drama, the dynamic shifts. People expect you to argue back, to defend yourself, to feed the fire with words. But when you remain silent, you create a void, and that void becomes powerful. They begin to question themselves. They begin to chase for your reaction. They want to pull you back into noise, but your silence becomes your shield and your sword. There's another psychological layer to this: mystery. The human mind cannot resist mystery. When you speak less, people project their own ideas onto you. They wonder what you're thinking, what you're feeling, what you know that they don't. You become unpredictable, and unpredictability creates respect. This is why leaders who overshare, who talk too freely, lose their authority. But leaders who guard their words carefully are treated as if they hold secrets, as if they know something others don't. And in truth, they do. The secret is restraint. Brother, let's talk about power dynamics. In every room, there is a hierarchy, whether visible or hidden, and silence is one of the fastest ways to climb it. The man who talks too much is seen as trying to prove himself. The man who speaks little is seen as already proven. The man who rushes to fill the silence looks insecure. The man who lets silence stretch looks in control. This is why silence makes men magnetic. Think about the most admired characters in film. Men like Clint Eastwood's Man with No Name, Keanu Reeves as John Wick, or even Denzel Washington in The Equalizer. These men don't talk much. They don't explain themselves. They don't narrate their every move. They let silence create an aura of strength. And when they do speak, every word feels heavier, sharper, unforgettable. Science even supports this. Studies in communication show that people rate those who speak less, but with more pauses and intention, as more intelligent, more confident, and more trustworthy. Isn't that powerful? By saying less, you are seen as more. Now here's the challenge. In our world today, silence is harder than ever. Society rewards noise. Social media is built on oversharing. Everyone is talking, posting, arguing, shouting for attention. But this is why silence has become even more powerful. In a world of noise, silence is rebellion. In a world of oversharing, privacy is power. In a world of distraction, calm presence is dominance. So how do you practice the psychology of silence in daily life? 1. Pause before speaking. Train yourself not to rush into replies. A moment of silence before you speak makes your words heavier. 2. Listen twice. Speak once. Don't interrupt. Don't compete. Let others reveal themselves while you observe in silence. 3. Withhold explanations. You don't need to explain everything you do. Real men act, and let actions speak louder than words. 4. Embrace conversational silence. If someone expects you to overshare, don't. Let the silence grow. Watch how they react. 5. Save your words for impact. Don't waste them on noise. Use them like arrows, rare, precise, and unforgettable. The truth is, brother, silence is not emptiness, it is concentration. It is self-mastery. The man who controls his tongue controls his destiny. As we close this chapter, remember, every word you don't say adds weight to the words you choose to say. In a world where everyone is loud, be the man who is silent, and watch how the world leans in to hear you. Tell me this, brother, have you ever noticed that people respect you more when you speak less? Share your experience below. Chapter 3. Silence in conflict, relationships and leadership. Silence is not only a shield, brother, it is a weapon. It is one of the most powerful tools a man can use in conflict, in relationships and in leadership. Where most men lose control, silence gives you mastery. Where most men react, silence allows you to choose your response. And where most men waste energy, silence preserves it, channeling it into strength. Silence in conflict. Conflict has always been a test of masculinity. From the battlefield to the boardroom, men have always faced challenges where words could either escalate the situation or dissolve it. But history shows us this truth. The man who controls his tongue often controls the outcome. Think of Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor. He commanded the most powerful empire on earth, yet his writings reveal a man who valued restraint. When insulted, he wrote, "The best answer to anger is silence." He knew that to respond in anger, to meet words with words, was to descend to the level of the aggressor. But to remain silent was to rise above. In modern terms, silence in conflict is the ultimate display of emotional control. Imagine someone tries to provoke you with insults. Most men take the bait. They argue, they yell, they defend themselves. But the man who stays silent, who looks them in the eye, who doesn't flinch, who doesn't give them the reaction they crave, that man unsettles the aggressor. He becomes unshakable. Silence in conflict does not mean weakness. It means you choose your battles. You refuse to let others dictate your emotions. And when you finally do speak, your words are not wasted. They are decisive. Silence in relationships. Now let's talk about relationships. One of the most dangerous mistakes men make is believing that talking more will win respect and love. They overshare. They explain too much. They argue with words, thinking logic will solve emotional storms. But women do not respect a man who drowns in his own explanations. Respect is not one with noise. It is one with presence. A man who can remain silent when emotions are high shows that he is grounded, centered, and in control of himself. He doesn't need to match every emotional outburst with a response. He doesn't need to win every argument with words. His silence speaks louder. I will not be shaken. And here's the paradox. The less you speak in conflict with a woman, the more she reflects on her own behavior. Your silence becomes a mirror. Instead of fueling the fire with words, you give her space to hear the echo of her own actions. Silence in this sense becomes a teacher. But beyond conflict, silence in relationships also builds mystery and attraction. Oversharing kills desire. Explaining every detail of your thoughts and feelings removes the edge of masculinity. A man must remain a little unknown, a little unpredictable. That is what keeps respect alive. When you speak less, your presence becomes heavier. Your mystery draws her in. Silence in leadership. Finally, let's look at leadership. Every great leader understands the value of silence. Words move people, yes, but too many words make them meaningless. The strongest leaders use silence strategically. Consider George Washington. He was not a man of endless speeches. He often sat quietly in meetings, listening, observing, and letting others speak. But when he did speak, his words carried so much weight that men followed him into war and built a nation under his command. Silence gives a leader authority because it shows discipline. A leader who talks too much looks insecure, as if trying to prove himself. A leader who speaks little but with precision commands loyalty. His silence tells the room, I am in control. I do not need to waste words to prove it. Silence also shows humility. A leader who listens more than he speaks earns trust. People feel heard. And when he finally speaks, they know his words are not careless. They are chosen with purpose. The balance of silence. Now, brother, we must be clear. Silence is not about withdrawing from life. It is not about refusing to speak at all. That is cowardice. Real silence is discipline. It is the ability to choose when to speak and when to remain silent. It is knowing that silence itself communicates power, and when broken, your words must carry meaning. Too much talking makes a man weak. Too much silence makes a man passive. The balance is this: let your silence build presence and let your words carry weight. Be a man of action, not chatter. A man of listening, not noise. A man of few words, but powerful ones. The modern struggle. In today's world, silence has become rare. Men are pressured to always respond, to always explain, to always prove themselves with words. But this constant talking dilutes your power. Think of it like currency. The more you print, the less it's worth. The same is true of words. But when you hold back, when you ration your words, when you let silence grow before you speak, you make your words precious. You create anticipation. People wait for your voice. And when you finally break the silence, you control the room. Action, steps to master, silence in life. In conflict, practice restraint. Don't argue back at every provocation. Let your silence unsettle the other. In relationships, stop oversharing. Keep parts of yourself private. Let your silence create mystery. As a leader, speak less, listen more. Let your silence draw others to you. In daily conversations, embrace pauses. Don't fear silence. Use it to amplify the weight of your words. Brother, silence is a language of its own. It communicates power without sound, respect without explanation, leadership without noise. It is the mark of a man who has mastered himself. As we close this chapter, remember, the strongest man in any room is not the one who talks the most. It is the one who could speak, but chooses silence. Now I ask you, brother, when was the last time your silence spoke louder than your words? Share your moment below. Chapter 4. The silent man a force the world cannot ignore. Brother, imagine walking into a room full of noise where every man competes to be heard. Yet there is one man who says nothing. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't chase attention. And yet all eyes are on him. That is the power of silence. Silence is presence amplified. It commands respect. It makes people wonder what you know, what you think, and why you don't waste words on what doesn't matter. In relationships, it builds respect. In conflict, it creates control. In leadership, it earns trust. But silence is not withdrawal, it is discipline. The silent man speaks less because he is strong enough to let his presence speak first. And when he finally speaks, his words hit harder than any shout could. Brother, let your silence be your fortress, your sword, your unseen power. The world is full of noise, but the man who masters silence stands above it all. Will you let your silence speak, or will the noise of the world drown you? Share your answer below.